A concerning report about a staple in our children's diets. We're talking about applesauce, moldy applesauce. A King 5 investigation uncovers some bad apples in the food safety industry. Here's Chris Ingalls with the questionable practices that some inspectors knew about for years.
They bring them in through there and put them in their cold storage rooms.
We're outside a Yakima institution. For 100 years, snow-kissed growers has survived the feast and famine of the agricultural business. The historic cannery churns out 50,000 tons each year of packaged apples, pears, and cherries.
In the facility,
they were new to their jobs on the plant floor when these two veterans of the food industry saw a side of the business that was rotten.
I thought it was terrible because I have never seen anything like that in my life.
They saw applesauce rotting and expanding in leaking 300-gallon storage bags. They said it should have gone in the garbage, but didn't.
It's appalling that a company would take those measures just to make a few dollars.
You've probably got one in your fridge, that long-lost jar in the back. As applesauce rots, a mold starts to grow, especially if the lid is loose. Snow-Kiss scraped off the mold, cooked the remaining applesauce, and then sent it down the production line for sale.
This is going out to people as food.
It was very moldy. It had 6-7 inches of mold on top of each one of the casks that they were in.
It happened a lot. We've obtained public records showing Snow-Kissed reprocessed more than 23,000 gallons of moldy applesauce in 1 year alone. And these records show Snow-Kiss's own consultant concluded in 2009 that the mold in applesauce would not be eliminated by your firm's thermal process. Records show the company continued selling it to customers.
Well, I knew they'd probably get sick. If it was an infant, might even die.
This is where much of Snow-Kiss product was going, school cafeterias across America. As a major supplier to the National School Lunch Program, the United States Department of Agriculture assigned full-time inspectors to monitor Snow-Kiss's operations.
They recombined it with fresh applesauce.
And that leads right back to these two. Wendy Allgard was USDA's inspector at Snow-Kiss for nearly 2 years. Jerry Pierce was her predecessor.
When you reported this to your boss at the USDA, what did he do about it?
I guess they promised my boss that they wouldn't do it again, and within a week they were doing it again.
I reported it to my boss, Doug Augsburg.
And what did he do about it?
I'd contacted my boss many times and I was basically told to mind my own business.
The inspectors did have the authority to take some action without their boss's approval. They rejected individual shipments of reconditioned applesauce intended for the school lunch program, but they couldn't stop it from going to other buyers. Government records show a large amount of mold was the reason an unnamed baby food manufacturer returned a shipment of applesauce in 2009. The inspectors say moldy baby food was reprocessed and sold to non-government customers, like grocery store chains.
Well, I felt helpless. I mean, what can you do? You know, what can you do?
Then, another government agency, the Food and Drug Administration, received this complaint about North Carolina school children sickened after eating snow-kissed applesauce.
You just get a little ding in it.
The FDA determined air leaks in dented cans spoiled the fruit, not reprocessing of moldy applesauce. In the investigation that followed, FDA inspectors came to the Yakima plant in the summer of last year.
I approached them and told them that I wanted to talk to them.
The FDA acted quickly on Wendy Allgard's tip, issuing this warning letter that put a stop to Snow-Kiss's applesauce recycling. It's something this man could have done years ago.
I'm Chris Ingalls from the King 5 investigators over in Seattle.
Doug Augsburg is the USDA's officer in charge in the Northwest. The man both inspectors say brushed off their concerns referred us to a media spokesperson in Washington, D.C.
You knew about that moldy applesauce.
Get a hold of Michael Jarvis. He'll have all your answers.
In a statement to King 5, spokesperson Mike Jarvis says USDA employees were diligent about their jobs, but their authority is limited solely to grading Snow-Kiss products intended for federal food programs. The USDA says it's confident only wholesome ingredients made it into the school lunch program. But these former inspectors say it's shameful the agency let potentially dangerous food bound for other consumers slip by.
I don't understand why you wouldn't do anything about that. That's what your own inspectors have told us. You just didn't do anything about it.
Have a good day.
Can't you help us understand this? I have here 11,537 documents the USDA sent in response to our public records request. And the agency says, look, this shows that we were working in that plant. We were doing inspections. We were holding the company manager's feet to the fire. So USDA redirected shipments of this applesauce, but they didn't stop them. Why? Tomorrow at this time, we'll explain why the USDA isn't always eager to go after the bad apples in the food business.
Federal investigators were instructed to ignore moldy food being sold by a Washington fruit processing plant.
The case uncovered by the King 5 investigators raises fresh questions about what the government is doing to keep your food safe.
In his continuing investigation, Chris Ingalls reports on one agency's failure to stop bad apples in the food business.
I thought it was wrong. You know, my goodness.
You don't have to be a federal food inspector to know it's wrong.
What they needed to do really was just to throw it away.
But Jerry Pierce and Wendy Algard are former inspectors for the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
I was appalled by it.
They tried to stop what they saw inside Snow-Kissed Growers' fruit processing plant. The Yakima company took 300-gallon bins of spoiled applesauce and scraped off the mold.
It was very moldy. It had 6-7 inches of mold on top of each one of the casks that they were in.
It's the industrial-sized equivalent of scraping the mold off applesauce in your fridge. Snow-Kissed would then heat treat the remaining applesauce and send it down the production line for sale. The company reprocessed tens of thousands of gallons of moldy applesauce each year.
It was completely horrifying because unsuspecting people are going to be consuming that and they could potentially be harmed by it.
When you reported this to your boss at the USDA, what did he do about it?
I guess they promised my boss that they wouldn't do it again, and within a week they were doing it again.
Even if you've never seen a Snow-Kissed can, you could have bought some at your grocery store. The company supplies many major applesauce brands who sell it under their own label on store shelves.
They recombined it with fresh applesauce.
The inspectors say years of complaints to their supervisors didn't stop it.
Why do you think they wouldn't act on your concerns about this?
Money. It's money.
All they're out to do is just try and make money instead of being what their original job is, being concerned for the product and the safety of people.
It's true that Snow-Kissed paid the USDA user fees that covered the costs of USDA inspectors in its plant. Many companies do it. It's a requirement for food suppliers to the National School Lunch Program like Snow-Kissed. USDA records obtained by the King 5 investigators show Snow-Kissed paid the USDA more than $500,000 in user fees over 4 years.
And it was a good boost for my supervisor. It made him look awfully good in Western region as well as Washington, D.C.
The USDA told King 5 its inspectors work diligently to keep reprocessed applesauce out of school lunch food. It says its inspectors don't have the authority to halt shipments to non-government customers like grocery store chains. There are other cases in which the USDA ignored food safety issues, sometimes with severe consequences. An example, USDA inspectors worked in this Iowa egg plant where rotten eggs were splattered on equipment, egg drippings covered the floor, and a bathroom had no sink for basic hygiene. Employees complained about the unsanitary conditions.
I told the USDA officer about it, and she says, well, just go back and do your job.
In 2010, a salmonella outbreak at Wright County Eggs sickened thousands of people and led to the nation's largest ever egg recall.
USDA has an arm that's interested in food safety, but the vast majority of it is interested in purchasing food and getting it to the public.
Bill Marler, an attorney and food safety advocate, says it's not just about money. It's also what some view as a misguided mission by the USDA. The agency promotes agricultural products, an important role, but one that is at odds with being the food police.
The goal shouldn't be just let's grease the skids to get food from, the farm to your kid's lunch plate. But there's got to be oversight and food safety concerns, along the way.
In principle, the USDA has agreed with that. In this agreement signed with the Food and Drug Administration, the agency pledged to immediately report food safety violations witnessed by USDA employees.
This memorandum of understanding between FDA and USDA has been around for a long time. It just doesn't work.
What happened at Snow-Kissed with these inspectors may be the latest example of that.
Well, I felt helpless. I mean, what can you do? What can you do?
Even if you've never heard of snow-kissed applesauce, you may have eaten it. The Washington company distributes its product under many brand names.
Now the King 5 investigators have reviewed thousands of documents that reveal more problems inside a plant that was recycling moldy applesauce.
King 5's Chris Ingalls reports they raise new questions whether federal food watchdogs did enough to stop the bad apples in the food business.
This is the can that I had tucked away in the back of the fridge that the kids had eaten out of.
Lisa Broom hoped an apple a day, snow-kissed applesauce,
Here you go,
would settle the stomachs of her 2 children, ages 1.5 and 4.
So we were using a lot of applesauce. After that, their diarrhea, both of them, got much worse.
And then she saw this.
Snow-Kiss scraped off the mold, cooked the remaining applesauce, and then sent it down the production line for sale.
The King 5 investigation into Snow-Kiss's reprocessing of moldy applesauce.
I was disgusted. I was nervous and wondering, is this why they were sick for so long?
The month-old Snow-Kiss can was still in her fridge.
When I opened it to look inside, it appears to have brownish, dark mold.
We agreed to take Lisa's snow-kissed cans and others provided by viewers who've been watching our investigation to a lab for testing. We brought 4 cans to the food scientists at the Institute for Environmental Health, who routinely examine agricultural products. Under the microscope, they see none of the telltale signs of mold.
There's no reason to be concerned about.
In Lisa's can, they find only discolored applesauce, harmless.
After looking at it under a microscope, we are just saying that this is just dried applesauce, and there's no mold.
This is the plant that made that applesauce. Snow-Kissed Growers, for decades a major supplier to the National School Lunch Program. Inspectors from the U.S. Department of Agriculture were on site daily for grading and quality control.
And every day, those USDA workers filled out sanitation and inspection reports. We poured through nearly 12,000 of those records that we got from the USDA. And they show one thing in particular was a persistent problem at Snow-Kissed.
A 4-letter word in the world of cleanliness, mold. In sanitation reports from 1 month in 2009, for example, mold is listed in 216 different places, growing on conveyor belts, peelers, and walls. In most cases, it's listed as MJ, a major violation.
When I first got there in 2009, it was horrendous.
Wendy Allgard is the former USDA inspector who wrote many of those reports.
It's mold on belts and on the side of processing equipment, where you'd have fruit rolling by and the fruit would hit the mold, and that's just not acceptable.
Snow-Kiss says mold is common in these types of plants, and it quickly cleaned it up. Not so, says Allgard.
But the quantity that they had was a shock to me, because most places that you go to, it'll be just one tiny spot as opposed to their whole processing area.
Reports show Snow-Kiss sanitation record did improve under Allgard's watch.
They bring them in through there and put them in their cold storage rooms.
It was mold actually in applesauce, stored in these 300-gallon bins, that was Snow-Kiss's undoing. Last summer, Allgard tipped another government agency, the Food and Drug Administration, that Snow-Kiss was reprocessing moldy applesauce, heat treating it, and then selling it to unsuspecting customers. The FDA put an immediate stop to it with this October warning letter, and Snow-Kiss remains under investigation. Allgard told the FDA because her bosses at the USDA ignored years of complaints from several inspectors concerned about the health hazards of reprocessed applesauce.
It's just unbelievable, because you're being paid to try and keep people safe, and there's nothing I can do about it.
Right now, we're pretty comfortable that we're addressing every issue that is out there.
Snow-Kiss President Jim Davis spoke to news cameras last year, but would respond to King 5 only by email. He called the reprocessed applesauce commercially sterile and said Snow-Kiss treatment process rendered it healthy and safe for the public to consume. Davis said an extremely insignificant amount of applesauce was reprocessed, just a small percentage of the company's overall product.
Oh, you're going to put your little people in the truck? All right.
In spite of those assurances and test results showing her family was never at risk, Lisa Broom says no more Snow-Kissed in her house.
And I'm concerned for who knows how many families have been eating this.
You'll notice that the cans in our story all have Snow-Kiss labels, and cans like this were distributed by the USA to local food banks. But Snow-Kiss also distributes products to other brands that put their own label on it and ship it to grocery stores. So you may have had Snow-Kissed and not known it.